Hi, Jeff Wilcox here. This video is from my book and my workshop entitled Initiating Spiritual Conversations. This particular segment is about using word pictures to explain spiritual things. Word pictures are a great way to communicate spiritual truths to people. Now, most people you talk to have heard of Jesus, and many of them have heard that his death on the cross can somehow deal with our sin problem. But many of those folks out there don't really understand how to have a personal relationship with God. A lot of them don't understand that it requires a decision to trust Jesus. When we use word pictures to explain the gospel, people tend to really grasp this much better. And if you go back and read the Gospels, you'll see how often Jesus did just this. Much of the time, he used an illustration that the person could really relate to, didn't he? And what do we call the word pictures that Jesus used? They're called parables. Using word pictures is one of my favorite ways of explaining the gospel. Once your conversation is going in a spiritual direction, often something will come up that perfectly fits a word picture. And here's what I normally say. I'll say to the other person, "You're familiar with parables, right? The little word pictures Jesus used when he taught?" I heard a great word picture along these lines that really made sense to me. Let me run it by you and see what you think. Here's a situation where using a word picture could be very helpful. Suppose someone says to you, "Well, I believe in God," or they may even say, "I believe in Jesus." You should say, "That's great. I'm glad you do. But tell me, what do you mean by that?" And they'll probably tell you that they believe God really exists and that Jesus was a real person. Then you can say, "Well, you're familiar with parables, right? The little word pictures Jesus used when he taught? I heard a real good one along these lines that really made sense to me. Let me run it by you and see what you think." Then you could use the word picture I call believing in the president. I'll say, "Tell me something. Do you believe in the president?" Then I'll stop and say, "Now, wait a minute. If you don't like this one, you can go back to the previous one. My real question is this: do you believe that the president is a real person?" And they'll probably say yes. Then you could say, "Do you know what he looks like?" "Yeah." "Do you know what his voice sounds like?" "Yeah." "Do you know where he lives, that big white house, Pennsylvania Avenue?" And then I'll say, "You know a lot about him, right?" And they'll agree. And then I'll say, "Well, let me ask you a question. Could you have breakfast with him tomorrow?" And they'll probably look at you like you're crazy and say, "Of course not." And then you can simply say, "Well, why not?" One of the answers I've gotten to this question was, "Well, because the Secret Service won't let me." So I simply said, "Why not?" And he said, "Well, because I'm not on the approved list." So again, I simply said, "Why not?" And after a couple more times of asking why not, he finally said, "Because he doesn't know me." And my response was, it's the same way with God. We can know a lot about him, but still not know him personally. And that's where the decision to trust Jesus comes in. And this may be just the thing that helps them really grasp God's offer.